Hello, everyone. Hello. Our flower tonight probably doesn't need any introduction. It is one with a bold personality, and that is hibiscus. Hi, I'm Allison from the Well Cultivated Life, and thank you for joining me for Flower Power. I love to share plant wisdom with all of you. Now, hibiscus is originally, most of the species of hibiscus are originally from Asia, and it is in the Malvaceae family. And that means it is related to plants that grow more in a temperate zone, such as marshmallow, and also rose of Sharon is another one that you uh, can grow if you live in a northerly climate. But for the most part, most hibiscus grow in a more tropical types of areas. And so if you live in the United States and you're in Florida, let's say, you might actually be able to grow the hibiscus that is so famous for uh, herbally, the red bright tea that we love so much. Now, this hibiscus here, I don't know the exact species of it, but let's just say went to the garden center one day. Here it was looking at me, and there was no way that I could not be attracted to this incredible flower. And this particular one that I have is kind of like a herbaceous perennial. It dies back completely every winter, and it's here in zone. I'm in zone 5, so there are different types of hibiscus that you can grow in the more northerly areas. Now, of course, hibiscus also grows in Hawaii. That's one of the places where you see people with hibiscus flowers in their hair, and it turns out that hibiscus flower, depending on I'm checked in with a friend of mine. I haven't heard back from her yet, but apparently, depending what side you wear your hibiscus flower on, it determines what your relationship status is. So be careful where you put your hibiscus flowers, just in case. You don't want to get hit on if you put it on the wrong side. Now, it's interesting because I say hit on because hibiscus symbolically is really always been associated with sort of femininity and beauty and femaleness, and you can see why it's quite striking and quite attractive. Now, it is this way because flowers, of course, their purpose is to become pollinated and make seed, and the hibiscus doesn't really have a strong scent, and so it has put all of its sexual attraction energy into the color and the boldness of the flower itself to attract over the pollinators and any other types of insects to come over to, do their business with this particular flower. Now, I noticed this, but I also read that the hibiscus flowers, they put all this energy in, but then they're only bloom for like 24 to 48 hours. And so that's a lot of resources to put into a flower that may or may not get pollinated in that short period of time. But apparently it works for hibiscus because that is the way that it has evolved over the centuries and who knows how long, right? Now, one of the other, it's used a lot in Ayurvedic medicine, and there is a lot of information about how it's represented and its importance in different types of countries. And in India, it is considered sort of a sacred plant and is used as a offering for, particularly for Lord Ganesh. And I already told you about the Hawaiian tradition of it, and there are a lot of other kind of cool hibiscus lore. If you're interested, you can look up and find out more information about that. Now, there are many, many species of hibiscus, and some of them are more specific for making tea. Hibiscus sabdarifa is one of the main varieties for the tea. And if you have been around for a while, like I have, and been drinking tea for a while, you probably have heard of this type of tea that was originally made by Celestial Seasonings called Red Zinger. Well, the zing in zinger is from hibiscus. That is the bright red, tart, somewhat sour flavor that is in that tea. And so it is uh, makes a great cooling herb. And I originally talked about this whenever that was, a couple months ago on my herbally inspired summer retreat when we were talking about cooling herbs. And I wanted to do a whole show on it for you tonight. Now, it is nutritious. It has vitamin C, it's high in vitamin C, and it also has 49% of your daily dose of manganese. And this is a mineral that's used by our mitochondria. So that's kind of an important one, right? It contains small amounts of calcium, potassium, of B vitamins as well. And the, like I just said, this may look like a hot babe, right? But it is cooling. And so a lot of times we see these signatures where something that looks hot and bright is working on a cooling action within the body. And when we're talking about cooling in this way, we don't mean necessarily lowering our temperature, although herbs can work in that way as well for reducing fevers. But it also refers to any sort of hot tissue states, such as inflammation, redness, a sore throat. Any of these kinds of irritated tissue states are also considered hot. And so you would use a cooling herb to cool those down. Now, with irritation, you'd probably actually also use some other types of more soothing herbs with it as well. But that is what we mean when we're talking about cooling. Now, hibiscus does have a specific use or an affinity for, I should say, to the more genital urinary systems, and so it has been used for um, uterine, like excess bleeding or inflammation, and it helps in that area. And it may help with urinary tract infections. It's very similar in flavor to like the cranberry that we're always told to take if we get a urinary tract infection. But I didn't find anything specifically talking about that. However, the vitamin C content is definitely something you could use if you had an infection. It's also been noted as lowering blood pressure. And so that's that might be a bit of a hot condition. You think about my pressure is up, my stress is up. That's considered more of like a hot condition. And if you're angry, that's a hot condition. So any of these types of herbs that work on cooling can work for that as well. Now, I did see some kind of indications that there are certain conditions that you don't want to be drinking a lot of hibiscus tea. 1 cup of red zinger probably won't be a problem, but if you are, it's not recommended for anyone who's pregnant or breastfeeding. And it's also, if you already have low blood pressure, you don't want to be taking a tea that, or an herb that lowers your blood pressure. That would not be a good match. So, um, this is just bringing me to the point where I want to remind you that herbs, even though some of them are culinary, some of them we just have a nice herbal tea with no caffeine and we think it's great. Some of these things are very potent and they can interact with medications. And so you do need to, if you find an herb that you really want to start taking a lot of, just make sure if you're taking a medication that it does not interact with your medication. And I think I talked about this a couple weeks ago, but uh, turns out that like blood pressure type medications tend to have the most interference from herbs. So if you're taking something like that, make sure and check with your doctor or look at the indications for this and make sure that it's safe for you to have in large quantities. If you are basically healthy, you should be fine having hibiscus tea to cool you down whenever you want to. Now, the flower essence, we got our beauty and okay. Let me show you that. Let me show you these slides because uh here is the hibiscus that's commonly used for tea. This is the bush, and does get rather large, usually about 15 feet tall. And there's the flower. Okay. Are you telling me this is not the epitome of like blatant sexuality, right? This flower is not messing around. It's got its out there and its pistils right there. And I think there's five on this one. So this one looks really similar to that. So there is no doubt about it that it's looking for some insects to come along. And these are the couple of plants that you can grow in the northern hemisphere, which is on the left. That's marshmallow, which is my kind of um, representative plant for my business, the Well Cultivated Life. And then on the right is a rose of Sharon, which does come in different colors, and that's also a semi-large shrub as well. And let's see here. Here is an example of the tea and the beautiful ruby red color that it makes, and some of the dried hibiscus as well. And I think that was it. Yeah. And so the flower essence, actually, I do want to I'm going to put this slide back up because this sexuality is one of the main areas that the hibiscus flower essence helps us to work on. And so according to Flower Essence Services, it helps us to have more warmth and responsiveness in our sexuality and to bring a more balance into our body and our passion. And the people who might need this are people that really don't have an enjoyable sexual experience. They don't feel, they may feel like they're being exploited. There might be some cultural or other expectations, or even cases of sexual abuse that have happened, that hibiscus can help you bring yourself back into balance for that. Now, according to flowersforhealing.com, she has some really nice things to say about hibiscus and how it works. And she says that the hibiscus flower essence assists in opening you to a broader perspective of your personal world, as well as your vision of this world that we live in. It assists in awakening to aspects of knowledge and wisdom of your core essence, so that the vision of your personal world becomes broader and less limiting. And for women, probably more so than men, our core essence has an awful lot to do with how we feel about our body and whether we're sexy enough and are we, beautiful enough. And unfortunately, in our current society, at least in Western society, there is a lot of emphasis put on, our uh, physical body and our appearance. And so this ability to kind of like broaden our worldview and say, it's not just about there's much more to the world and to ourselves than just what we look like. And she goes on to say that the flower essence assists in the ability to leave behind layers of vulnerability and fragility. These are things that can come up from sexual experiences that being and physicality have created through many experiences, including those of past generations. And I thought that was so interesting because this idea of kind of like a generational trauma that gets passed down to us is something that I've been just learning more about over the last year or so. And it's not just trauma, but also wisdom, right? We pass down wisdom, we pass down our trauma as well. And it's something that, like I said, people are being more aware of now. And so much kind of, I don't know, unrest can come from our feelings about our own sexuality, that even though, biologically we know this is what we're going to do to reproduce, and we know that it's a pleasurable experience for most people, or it's meant to be, we still can get a lot of difficulties around it. So if you are in a situation where you're feeling emotional difficulties around your sexuality, hibiscus flower essence might be the right one for you. Now, I chose this plant this week because obviously this is blooming right now. And did I need to share this with you? Absolutely. It's just incredible. All right, let's get a better picture of it. Look, it's almost as big as my head. And like I said, the blooms don't last for very long, so I wanted to be able to share it with you this week while it's still in bloom. Now, I thought I had a card for hibiscus, but I didn't. And so I decided to choose a card from the Wisdom for Healing card deck by Carolyn Myss. And this is not a plant card deck. It is um, it's more, well, it's Wisdom for Healing. All right. So this is the card that I chose for today. And I thought it was a really good match for Hibiscus. It's the name of the card is to reflect on pride and ego. So what she says on the card is to acknowledge that negative pride causes more harm and suffering to relationships and to your overall life than can be measured. Notice where you're losing power because of false pride and recognize that it's poison to your spirit and thus to your healing. So these cards are really nice. I've used them in some of my retreats that I've done, and also programs and courses, because they just are kind of like a daily card. You can draw the card each day and it gives you a little, or once a week, it gives you some things to work on and think about for that week. And so I thought this was a great match for Hibiscus because, you know, if there's any plant that looks like it has an ego, it certainly is these bold and forward hibiscus flowers. They are definitely very proud. They're not humble or shy, and they are right out there saying, look at how beautiful I am. Look at how lovely I am. Now, humans are not so good about our egos. We tend to either let our egos get in the way and get ourselves hurt, or um, we lack a lot of confidence, and we get uh, much of the time when it comes to our ego. So when we are putting ourselves out there, we get blamed. Oh, you're too egotistical. And oftentimes, when we have this false pride, where even though we know we're wrong, and we refuse to admit it, and we refuse to resolve situations, it really can be very damaging. This is what the card is saying. So, yes, be beautiful. Yes, show yourself out. But this week, you can do some reflection on sort of your pride and ego. You should be a proud person, but not let your pride get in the way of healing relationships. So, think about, is there some place where this is happening for you, where you might be sort of refusing to admit you're wrong because you feel like you it might be hurtful or something like that. And just see if there's maybe a way that you can still be beautiful and try to heal some of those relationships. So that's our message from Hibiscus. We got a lot of stuff in there. We're talking about sexuality and pride and ego. So hopefully some of these messages ring true for you. And thank you so much for joining me. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. And I'm excited to if you're watching live or in within the week after this comes out, I am going to be doing a new retreat called Soothing the Senses, which is going to be starting on, when is it starting? The 24th, August 24th, 2022. So I will put a link down. If you're interested in knowing more about it, you can sign up below. So thanks so much for joining me and have a great night, everybody.